The 1984 video for Magic by the Cars featured a wild cast of characters who rush to surround a backyard pool. Why? Lead singer Ric Ocasek walks on water while singing about how the feeling of being close with someone can be like magic. The entire crowd is fixated on Ocasek throughout the video, even after he leaves the water and walks around the pool's perimeter. It's the kind of attention that any brand would love to have. But if you've ever been to a trade show, you know that most brands barely get the time of day from attendees, even if they've paid enormous sums of money to have their logo splashed all over trade show swag. But what if a brand brought along someone who could fixate the crowd like Ric Ocasek? While I didn't ask him to sing this week, I did talk with magician and infotainer Anders Boulanger. His company, Engagify, specializes in driving brand engagement at trade shows. We discuss the art of infotainment, engagement versus awareness, the power of emotion in decision-making, crafting compelling stories, cheat codes for engagement, and engaging in a virtual world. Let's get to it.
Welcome to Next in Queue, the podcast for contact center and customer experience professionals. Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy 2 Vision. Eliminate blind spots and see right through every conversation with Happy 2 Vision. Learn more at happitu.com. Now, here's your host, Rob Dwyer.
Hey everybody, we're back for another episode of Next in Queue. Today, I have a guest who has probably the most fun name for me personally to say all this season. Anders Boulanger. I love doing the French.
Nailed
Did
it.
I do it okay? Yeah.
Nailed it. Yeah. I might have shared with you before that, like, I have a Swedish first name. I was named after a Swedish hockey player. I'm Canadian, but named after a Swedish hockey player, and then a French last name. So people often will go Andres Boulanger, which will correct the first name, or Anders Boulanger. So you kind of got to split the difference, and you nailed it. So, yeah.
Well, I feel really satisfied that I nailed it. I took an entire semester of French in high school because they ran out of German for me to take. And all I got from that was how to ask what time it is. And I don't understand you if you respond in French. And I know how to sing a fun little kids song about counting elephants.
Oh,
This is what I
I don't
got.
know that one, but yeah. Okay. Well, hey, at least you came away with something, you know?
That's what I've got. Anders, you are the founder and CEO of Engagify, which is a company that specializes in infotainment, which I think is just a fantastic way to describe what it is that you do. But it's a different kind of infotainment that I think most people would think of. Tell me a little bit about Engagify, and then we'll get into talking about engaging people.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll go back a little bit. Like I grew up doing magic and being a magician. So I was 5 years old. I got a Fisher-Price magic set for Christmas and started doing, tricks at show and tell in kindergarten, that kind of thing. So I've always been performing and made my way through university. I got a physics degree doing magic for, fairs, festivals, that sort of thing. did a lot of corporate work, conferences and, corporate events. And then I started doing trade shows. And so when I started doing trade shows, I discovered, and other people had done this, and I studied from many people, that magic's a great tool to engage, right? It's got this aha factor or this twist that people go, what? And in that moment you can insert some messaging, and it's just like very cool. So I started working for technology companies, talking primarily about software, sometimes hardware, but different, companies that want to get a certain message across. And I use magic as my medium. So that is the infotainment. It's the information of the client combined with the unique form of entertainment. And it's not always magic. I mean, so I do a kind of almost like a physics demonstration where I like shoot a rubber band and then it comes back to me. It's like a boomerang rubber band trick shot, which is all physics, but you hang messaging on it, and there's these engaging elements that you can, make it so that people want to listen to the message, right? So we like to think of infotainment as the spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down. And that is one of the main things that Engagify does, is provide this type of infotainment for clients at conferences, trade shows.
Okay, I have to know. 5-year-old Anders go-to magic trick out of the Fisher Price suitcase. What was the favorite trick that you learned?
I almost should just run down and grab it. Hey, I have it downstairs. I have it. It's like a fake little suitcase. I think the easiest one was, there was this like yellow drawer, and there was a little sponge bunny, and you put it in and put the drawer in and open it up, and it'd be gone. And that was kind of like one of the easy go-to. Well, they were all pretty easy to use for kids, right? But there was another one where your magic wand, a little flower appeared at the end. Some fun things.
Okay, so that's 5-year-old Anders. You just talked about your physics demonstration with the rubber band, but is there a favorite of yours today that you just love? Like, this is the magic that I love to do.
Well, one of my signature pieces is where I do challenges at the end of my presentations, and gamifying, we're maybe getting into this a little early, but gamifying and adding an element of risk does make things more interesting and engaging. So I will often have $2,000 on me, and this sounds like, oh, we got to take that guy out. Take him, roll him in the parking lot if you see him walking by. But I have a fan of cash, and someone can win $2,000 from me at the end of my presentation. So people want to stick around, whether they're going to get picked or they want to see if the person will win. There's this open story loop that happens. And so one of the things I do is I give them a coin, 50-cent piece, and they have to go behind their back and put it in one of their hands. And we do it 3 times in a row. And I got to guess which hand it's in 3 times in a row. And if I'm wrong, they win $2,000. And people do win. I try to, contain it. Like, I try to play games I'm very good at. And so that has become a very, like I said, kind of a signature thing, and people will come to watch to see what happens. And, and so there's a lot of psychology into it as well. So
I feel like we need to get a list of all of your appearances just so people can show up and like try
show
to
up. Yeah, not
$2,000.
rob me, but show up. Yeah, that's I shouldn't be even saying that, like putting that out there. But anyways, yeah.
So trade shows, right? I've been to multiple trade shows. I imagine a lot of the people in the audience have been to a lot of trade shows. And your whole intent about appearing at a trade show is to engage people with a brand. But can you talk to us about the difference between engagement and awareness, and why I, as a brand, should be focused on engagement versus awareness?
Sure. One of the things that when you say that comes to mind is that, what are people like? Engagement's thrown around a lot, like people say, oh, we're going to be giving out these pens for engagement. And it's like, I don't know how much engagement, someone grabbing a pen, they're just like, thanks, I'm out. Like, so there's not a lot of So I always like to say that engagement doesn't really come from technology or from, swag. It comes from people, right? Like we're giving people a reason to stop, but now you have to give them a reason to listen, and you have to have that, those human elements involved, right? So, brand awareness is thrown around a lot too. When you talk about objectives of a trade show, people say lead generation and brand awareness. That'll be either number one and number two, or number two and number one. And brand awareness, the amount of money people spend on some of these sponsorships is kind of insane, right? Like they $40,000 to put up this banner, like just, okay, that's brand awareness. You're just getting a logo in front of people, right? But if you can create engagement in your booth that connects with people on the human level, now you're not getting brand awareness, you're getting brand affinity, right? You're getting people to have a feeling about, and maybe a memory of the messaging about what your company does and how they can help you, right? How they can help the potential customer. So, when you architect an experience in the booth, you want to have those things in mind, that you want people to be able to feel something and have emotion involved. And oftentimes in corporate, we don't like to talk about emotions, right? Like, but that emotion it can be awe, it can be wonder, it can be laughter, it can be, there's lots of positive emotions to tap into, but we can also, take them down the road of how many people are feeling this pain, because we understand our customers, and then you see these like nods of, oh yeah, So if we can kind of take those people on a journey, or tell that story that they're already feeling, you can engage their minds. And if we can win that over, and also with the emotions, kind of win their hearts, we're going to win their wallets. And so that's where we just want to think in a little bit bigger of a way, as opposed to just giving away a pen, giving away a copy, right? Let's try to make it less transactional and more transformational.
Well, and you hit on something that I am a firm believer in, and that is we buy based off of emotion. And then after the fact, we justify our purchases using logic. Like, we don't buy because this is whatever product or service is the most logical choice. We buy it because there's a feeling associated with that. And you're trying to generate those good feelings so that people do want.
There's a Harvard researcher, professor, and he in his findings, up to 95% of purchasing decisions are unconscious, which is a huge amount, right? And I mean, immediately we go, well, that's not the way I do it. But newsflash, it's unconscious. You don't really know you're doing it. Like you can't, it's hard to like disassociate yourself from your unconscious to do that. So what you had just said there, Rob, they were justifying, with logic, right? In the moment, we make sense of it, but we may have chosen to buy before we realize we've chosen to buy. And so that emotional piece to it, and that unconscious piece to it, it's a little bit woo-woo, right? Because it's kind of like we can't wrap our arms around it. It's not a concrete thing. It's not something that, you're going to find, companies betting a lot of money on in terms of, marketing strategies or sales strategies. So that's where it's a little bit tricky, right? But if you know that is an underlying piece, it can be very powerful for the brands who understand that, and support that.
Yeah. You said a word earlier that I'd love to dig more into, and that's storytelling and the power of storytelling. Can you tell us a little bit about how you approach that? Because you are working with, I assume, often new brands that you may not be familiar with when they first engage with you. So how do you go about storytelling when it's someone that previously you didn't know the story of?
Well, I think storytelling, it can get thrown around a lot in corporate. Like, here's our corporate story, and it's like, not, it's just actually more messaging, right? It's not like, but if we look at really the elements of it, beginning, middle, and end, there is a story arc, there's a journey, right? But sometimes it can be very, make it small, make it like, here's the problem this person's having, here's the twist. Oh, and now they're great, right? So that has that beginning, middle, and end. Chase a monkey up a tree, throw coconuts at it, get the monkey out of the tree. That's, like kind of a story recipe, if you will, right? So a lot of times in what we do, because we're incorporating, and when I say we have a number of certified infotainers that work with Engagify. We're using, plots that we know in terms of repertoire that we currently use. And we're able to plug in the right benefits and the right problems in the right areas to make that story. So the story in a lot of times is a trick. And I hate to call it a trick because it makes it sound so trivial, right? My mentor used to call it a transformation mechanism, which sounds so much cooler, right? So that's what we do. But the stories themselves, people, when you start even just showing that you know where people are at, and you start explaining something, and there's things that we use that are called hypnotic language patterns. So if you say, like, imagine a world where it was easy to fill in the blank. As soon as you use the word imagine and then start describing something, that is an example of a hypnotic language pattern. So it's almost a command for us to actually think, or you say, what would it be like if, and then fill in the blank. People can't help but go into their minds and start thinking about it. And so the beauty of stories is most of it happens in the listener's mind, right? So you can start creating this story and building this case for people to take a closer look at a product or service by utilizing those certain language patterns, by injecting themselves into the story, right? Because they are like the main character. They're seeing themselves in the story. And, again, seeing something in beginning, middle, and end, they're going to have a sense of closure. And, and sometimes you don't want that. Sometimes you leave off the end. It's because you want them to look for more, right? So stories are super powerful. I always call them like an engagement act. You can be bad at a lot of things, but if you've got a good story, it's like an equalizer. So worth taking a closer look at for yourself if you're trying to promote your personal brand or your company.
So speaking of engagement hacks, when I was a kid, I had the first NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System, and at one point we got something that was a little magical. It was called the Game Genie, and it was this gold extension that you plugged the game cartridge into, and then you plugged it in, and it gave you like cheat codes, right? Unlimited lives or whatever the case may be. Right? It made things easier for you, and it felt a little bit like magic. But I'm wondering if you've got any Genie cheat codes for the listeners, whether they're doing a presentation, maybe they're going to a trade show and they're not going to have you there, but they can do something a little bit better. What cheat codes could you give out for free today?
Sure. Well, one of the things that we often talk about, and this applies to virtual, it applies to like at a trade show, it applies to any sort of thing where you maybe feel like you're losing engagement, right? Like, and you need it back. And this will save you, what I'm about to share with you. And it's actually the acronym SAVE YOU. Okay. So I'm going to go through them and we won't spend too much time on them because there's 5 of them. But the S is simple. So speaking in simple terms, often corporate speak, different, your vernacular, even the word vernacular, like what the heck are you talking about, right? Like the choice of the words you use makes things more accessible, and we don't want to turn off people or lose people, right? Because of that, right? The people who aren't in the know or what have you. So simplicity. So that's the first one. Okay. The A is about authority. So that is credibility. That is how you show up, right? How you're dressed, how you speak. One classic example in terms of a vocal pattern is people who upspeak. They kind of go up at the end of their sentences. Everything sounds like a question, right? And so It's like, are you telling me or are you asking me, right? So how can you package yourself so that you're an authoritative voice on what you're talking about? That's going to make people want to listen, right? Because they're getting it, they're getting the straight goods in that way, okay? The V stands for vary the senses, or visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, okay? I know there's 5 senses, not 3, but when you talk about communication, we're not doing a lot of smelling and tasting of people's communication, right? So hopefully not, actually. So with that, when we talk about something, that's an auditory term, right? We might be able to make people visualize certain things, right? And then they'll be able to see what we're talking about. See what we're talking about? I just used a visual and an auditory, right? And then they can feel, confident that they're getting their point across, right? So by varying the different types of words, you are hitting different people in the audience. And it's like a shotgun blast, because certain people are going to associate to those different modalities more. And modalities is a big NLP word. So just like the different senses, right? So that's the V, varying it. Because if you will probably communicate the way that you like to be communicated, but that doesn't mean you're the same cup of tea for everyone, right? So, and then the E is emotion. And so we already talked about that, right? Can you make people feel things through your voice, how you talk about it, right? Can you talk about problem so you can wallow in the pain with them, and if you're like, has this ever happened to you? Yeah. Nod your head if you know what I'm talking about, right? But what if we could do this? And now I'm going somewhere positive with my voice, right? And so we can create emotion, okay? And then the U is really about relevance. It's you focused. Make sure it's on them. And the more we talk with yous and yours, instead of me's and mine and my company and like, no one cares. But if we can help the customer, the client, by saying, hey, how would you like it if your company, had 54% more in leads, right? Or whatever the benefit. Right? So those are the 5 to save you. So hopefully you'll remember them, write them down. Whoever's listening.
I love them. I love them all. Some of them even make me think of other specific guests that I've had on the podcast to talk about some of those very specific things in different contexts. Certainly the simple language makes me think about Leslie O'Haven, who is a proponent of using plain language, right? Which is just a way of writing and or speaking so that we communicate clearly to the widest possible audience, and using words and or phrases that some people may not understand really defeats the whole point of communicating, because you lose the message.
Yeah. And I've heard, the smartest person is in the room isn't smart because they sound smart. It's because they communicate so that everyone else understands. And when you're dealing with a lot of maybe systems engineers or technical people, they want to stack rank themselves by who's smarter. And so, but when they're dealing with a customer, it's important you kind of reset that and make it so relatable and use metaphors that are relatable to help simplify that language.
Yeah, it's all about, and I think there are roles that excel in this in company, or you need to excel in this in companies, specifically when you're talking about technical things, right? It's that translation of the highly technical into layman's terms, and then vice versa, right? That's kind of the business analyst role, is to be able to understand what a client wants and how to get that across to someone who's highly technical and going to architect this, engineer this. And then vice versa, when they ask a highly technical question or have some technical details that they're sharing, how do I present that back then in layman's terms to the business user who's actually going to use this, doesn't care about the jargon? I do have a question for you that has nothing to do with the things that we've been talking about, other than slightly tangentially. I want to know, as someone who practices, I'm not going to call it the dark arts, we'll just say magic, infotainment.
I used to say I do the lighter side of the dark arts. That's
Lighter
how I
side of the dark arts.
Yeah.
Perfect. I want to know, what's your favorite movie that has to do with magic or illusions?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think you know which one I'm going to say, just because it was so well done, is The Prestige. It's
really good.
Yeah. And I'll tell you why I like The Prestige in the way that I mean, it's not a true story, by any means, but the idea of rivalry during the golden age of magic, which was that kind of like last half of the 19th century, of the 1800s, was that they were trying to outdo each other all the time. And so the what do they call it? The transported man, or whatever, that illusion where they throw out the hat or bounce the ball, and the Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale characters are eating. They captured that really well. Right. And there's always going to be some stuff where you go, okay, that's not really, magicians don't really do that, or that, whatever. But for the most part, it's such a great movie with a lot of great twists and turns, kind of like a heist movie, that it was a lot of fun. It kept people guessing. And I think that really, is kind of the spirit of magic, is that kind of mystery and those twists. So on a related note, I live here in Winnipeg, Canada. And Winnipeg was on the vaudeville circuit. People would come up from Chicago and everything. And one of our magic historians, or the magic historian we have in our magic club, he actually has a picture of Horace Goldwyn and P.T. Selbit separated by a local Winnipeg magician. And those two names I just listed, they both are credited with inventing sawing a lady in half, which is such a classic. And they were at the same time, they were, peers, and they were actually touring Winnipeg at the same time, and the Magic Club hosted them. And so the one local guy in between them looked pretty awkward, because these guys hated each other, but they were, being cordial and being at this event. So that very much goes to that idea of the fierce competition between magicians.
They weren't holding saws where they weren't ready to
No,
saw
yeah, they'd
him
be
in
like,
half.
hey, I claim this. Yeah.
I'm wondering if you just got some magic to help me grow my hair back.
Well, don't you think I'd have more if that was the case?
It could be a choice.
It could be, yeah, it could be a choice. Yeah.
I like to tell people this is a choice, not. I mean, it's nature's choice. So, outside of trade shows, I know that trade shows are kind of bread and butter for you, but you talked about this just a little bit. Where else, like, if we're not in person, we're not at a trade show, does that mean I can't employ any of these principles, or are there other ways that I can engage people?
I mean, we are recording this virtually, right? I'm not right with you. But that's really where we developed a suite of trainings for companies. And one of the things that happened during the pandemic, I think we all realized, is Zoom meetings and virtual meetings can be a little draining and boring and can suck. And so we did a lot of work with our clients where we did the whole pandemic pivot, right? But we shifted to training people to have virtual engagement, right? To understand how they're framed, the lighting, the different things that they could do just to make it so people will take notice. What is that? What can you do that's going to just put you a little bit higher up than maybe the other sales call they took with your competition? What can you do to make it so that they remember your message more, right? And engagement is the answer. In fact, I've got a book that'll be coming out, and it won't be till next summer, but Engage First is the title. So we have to engage first before we tell, sell, or persuade. And so the lights behind me, I have these kind of, just the pure listeners, I have these orange, kind of lights that is on brand with our company. But what happened was, one time there was a company VMware is the company. It's a big tech company. I got to be in front of a lot of their marketing director, event people and they were going to be having a virtual summit, and they were looking for a virtual MC. And the woman who ended up hiring us, self-admittedly said that she was multitasking on 3 screens during this meeting because there was multiple people. And I had my background lights on, and she said, "Oh, that's interesting." And she started paying attention just because of so the background lights kind of got me on my foot in the door, right? And then I did a thing where I kind of leaned in and I kind of shared a little secret, and I kind of hushed tone and I moved closer to the camera. And she said she felt herself leaning into her computer, like she was trying to listen to the secret. And she realized, hey, this is the guy I want to MC our virtual summit. So I was able to land that by showing up in a good way, right? And that, in that case, I mean, I was selling engagement, virtual engagement, really for their people, right? And introducing their speakers. But the same goes for you, right? Like, be your own, engager, if you will, right? Virtually speaking, but it also goes to in person. And here's the other side of it. Coming out of pandemic, Rob, a lot of people forgot how to be in person. So we started doing more trade show trainings because and people coming into the workforce had never been to a trade show before, right? Early in their careers and their sales careers or marketing careers. So there's that kind of twist. Plus the fact there's some generational things happening where there's a lot more, screen and text message interactions and fewer, you don't have to even talk to a cashier anymore at the supermarket if you don't want to, right? Like you just have fewer social interactions in general. So, so that what's old is kind of becoming new again, right? So those who can engage though they're gonna stand out.
That's an interesting point that you talk about, just how the world is changing and how we engage on a day-to-day basis with those around us. I wonder, have you seen changes when you're at trade shows pre and post pandemic, and response,
feel like
how people work with you or interact with you? What's that been like?
I don't know if I would even say pre and post pandemic a little bit, but what I'm saying too is just as younger generations come into the workforce on the sales side of things, and because of the tech stack that companies sometimes have or employ, they're not even the sales development reps or the business development reps. A lot of them don't get on the phone anymore. So then they're frontline customer response at a trade show, or I should say lead development. And they don't know, they can't talk about the company because they haven't practiced talking about the company. They've written emails and done templates and then just kind of basically managed campaigns, email campaigns.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, we're taking our eyes off the ball a little bit in terms of that. And then when you think about those are the sellers that are going to be groomed up into business development reps and this sort of or not reps, but BDMs, business development managers and account executives and that sort of thing. I've talked to some sales leaders who say that there's kind of like a sales apocalypse that is brewing because of that. So, so that's, I do see the first bits of that. And so that's, cause to be aware for certain companies for sure.
It reminds me, I've talked with people at companies who are relying or trying to rely heavily on AI to focus that initial engagement. And I wonder what you think if we're leaving it up to AI to kind of bring those leads in, are we potentially setting ourselves up for some failures when we actually talk to a real human because the human isn't doing that messaging up front?
I think there's going to be a disconnect for sure. I mean, I've been called, maybe we talked about this, Rob, on when I interviewed you perhaps, but we were talking about a sales call. It was an AI sales call, right? And it's like, I probably stayed on the line longer just because I was curious, but you don't get upset hanging up on an AI for sure, right? So, and if it's going to make it up in numbers and try to find, but yeah, I think there has to be, you're going to have certain levels of expectation set, whether AI is setting that or whether humans are setting that. But when they don't match up, I think, you're going to find your failing moments of truth, right? And that's where, you're either building confidence in the product or service, or you're losing, or the prospects losing confidence in it, and creating stress, right? And so, we want to be constantly building that trust. People realize you're the real deal, and you can deliver, and you can close on that sale.
Yeah. I wonder if there's anything that I've mentioned before that made you think about something you wanted to talk about that we haven't had a chance to get to yet.
Did you say that one again? Like
sometimes this happens to me. Someone will say something and I'll have this thought and I'm like, oh, I want to talk about this, but then I get asked a question and I don't get to it. And so I wondered, is there anything that we haven't had a chance to talk about that earlier you were like, I'd really like to share this?
I mean, this, for the most part, I think we kind of check the boxes that I normally talk about. Like we say here at Engagify, we want to, help companies. We want to help deepen connection and also command attention. So that's when we talk engagement, sometimes what gets messed up is they're like HR, like people's satisfaction with their job. Like, no. It's like, actually, it's more about being engaging so that people pay attention, and then we can build those relationships, right? And I think that when it all comes down to it, business is about relationships. You hear that time and time again. And I think we have to be cognizant of that as we go into this AI era, that we're going to still need to know those people and trust those people so that relationships for business.
%. Well, Anders, if someone wanted to engage with Engagify,
please do.
You in particular, I assume LinkedIn is the best place to start. Anything else?
LinkedIn is the main social that I keep my eyes on the most, because it is we are in a B2B business in that sense. And then on our website is engagify.ai. So that's ENGAGIFY.ai. The AI is not the AI we were talking about. The AI we talk about is authentic interactions. So that's why.
Love it. I love it. Not artificial intelligence, authentic interactions. For my listeners, you know the drill. Go down into the show notes. You'll see links to both the website and Anders' LinkedIn profile. Anders, thank you so much for joining me on Next in Queue today. It's been awesome talking with you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, Rob.
Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy To and is produced by me, Rob Dwyer. If you enjoy this podcast, please by all means subscribe and or rate this podcast in iTunes or your favorite podcast app. But more importantly, please tell just one person about this podcast. Word of mouth is the best way for people to discover new content. As always, thanks for listening.